Let me know how that sounds. If you guys can hear that, if it's loud enough, if it's too loud, if it's clipping. Jump into the chat and let me know what's going on. Let's see here. Check in over there. All right. I believe it's working. So, all right. So welcome everybody. Welcome to another Hangout and studio chat. Let me know in the live stream, in the chat, if you can hear everything okay, if you can hear me. Also say hi, introduce yourself, say where you're coming from, where you're listening from, so we can all kind of get an idea of how far everything's reaching. Out and studio chat. Ooh, yep, it sounds like it's working. So, yeah, let me know. Welcome everybody. So today I wanted to go over a couple of things that I was thinking about and talking about a bunch with the people in my live performance course. We were talking about how to do modulation and how that plays when you're performing live, and particularly when you're performing live in an improvised way, right? So let's see. Yeah, so how that works into a live scenario, especially when you're improvising, because it can be a challenge to do modulation when you're not exactly sure what you're going to be playing, because often the modulation that you want to do needs to kind of go with what you're playing at any given moment. And so if you're doing an improvised performance, like the way I tend to perform, that can be, it can be a challenge because you don't know what you're going to do. So you can't set things up in advance, and it makes modulation sort of difficult and in some cases impractical for live performance. So because of that, I don't tend to have a whole lot of automated modulation, actually hardly any automated modulation in my case. I kind of like to be the modulator, right? I like to do manipulation versus modulation. So I like to change things and make them happen. However, there's sometimes when I'm doing that I would love for things to happen automatically. Like I get an idea and I want to do it, and the only way that I can keep that idea going is if I keep physically turning the knob and making the thing happen. And I just recently put an addition into my case that kind of fixes this in one sense, or makes this a bit easier in one sense. And because of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I'm using that and then how that's kind of changed what's going on in the case. So, so we're going to talk a little bit about, let's see if you can see it here. I actually have to turn this camera a little bit so you can see it. This module that's right over here is the Griffin's clause from Shachmat. And brand new, it just came out. They were kind enough to send this over to me, so I really appreciate that. Thank you to Bryce and Francois and all those guys at Shachmat, to give it a try to see what I think about it, because it's something that when I first heard about it, it was really interesting to me because it's something that kind of goes right along hand in hand with the way that I already perform. So again, a lot of times with modulation in a modular performance, you're going to connect, let's say, an LFO with an attenuator with some sort of thing, and then that's going to go into a sound, and then you're going to dial in the speed of the LFO and the amount of it using the attenuator, and that's going to give you some sort of modulation. And that's cool if you have the time to do that. But generally, when I'm performing live, I don't have the time to do that. So that's why I kind of default to doing it myself. So I'm actually making the moves myself. Now, what's different about the Griffin's clause is that this is basically an attenuation recorder. So if you want to have, you can have a sound, or you can have a voltage coming into this and then a voltage going out of that same channel. And this can act as an attenuator, so you can see how much of that voltage that you want to pass through. If you don't have a source coming in, it actually sends out a voltage. So you can send something out, and the sliders determine how much of that signal is being passed out or being sent out to whatever you're sending it to. So now, why is that cool? Well, what's cool is that this module records those movements if you choose, right? It's got like a 1-button record. So I can hold down the record, I can move the fader in a certain way as if I was moving the knob on the module, and then I can just release it and it'll keep going, it'll loop. And so the thing that's really interesting for me as a use case for this is that the reason I don't have much modulation is because I found it kind of not very useful because I'm not doing a lot of advanced planning. And with this, I can come up with an idea on the fly, I can patch it really quickly on the fly and just record it in, and then I can let that keep going while I move on to do other stuff. So how does that work? We'll do a little example of that. So kind of playing what I was playing before. So with the Bastl pizza, if I wanted to change the index mod, you can see that it can change the sound pretty dramatically. So let's say that's the movement that I wanted to do. If I wanted to try and time that to an LFO, it might be a challenge to get that dialed in, especially live. So it would be a real challenge to be able to make that work. But if I was to just patch into, let's say, the second channel, and I put it into that FM index over here, now the second channel, so that replaces now the knob. So I can do it here, or if I just press and hold the record button down here, and then I let it go, now it keeps doing that thing that I was doing before. And then I can move on to doing something else. And if I move on to a different section of my performance, and I want to do something, you know, I want to use that channel for something else again, all I have to do is just hit erase, and now that's back to just doing its own thing. I unplug the patch, I erase it. Now I have this set that I can plug it somewhere else in my case to do something different, right? So let's say I wanted to make this adjust the control, which in this case is set to be the decay. It's set up as an envelope. So if I've got something really short like that, and you can do movements that wouldn't necessarily be able to be done like with an LFO. And then that can keep going and keep doing that same thing. So again, it's pretty interesting when you do, when you're trying to incorporate something that's live and an idea that you get in the moment when you're improvising, with the ability to have something be automated. And that for me was how, you know, when I first got this, I was like, how am I going to incorporate this? It does all these cool things, but what is it going to do? How is it going to work for me, right? Other people will use this in a totally different way, and that's cool. But I was thinking, how is this going to work for me in a live setup in a way where I can be performing with it in an improvised, spontaneous, creative way, and have it add to my workflow rather than being something else that's kind of a pain that I have to set up, right? Which for me, a lot of modulation ends up being that way. So this way, it's really cool because again, it's just recording in those movements that you do, and you can quantize that recording to a certain number of, like you can clock it and have it be quantized to a certain number of beats or a certain number of bars, or you can have it just be tempo synced or you can have it be free flowing, which is how I have it right now. So that way you can really actually record in your own kind of very human movements into things and then just let it loop. As soon as you release it, it will start to loop that thing. And so it'll move in a much more organic way. So really super cool way to be able to do something spontaneous and yet have the machines kind of work for you. So it's kind of like if you're working in a DAW and you're recording in automation using a MIDI controller, and then you've got that automation that stays. This is kind of an automation recorder, but for control voltage instead of having to have MIDI or DAW or whatever. So super interesting. It does a lot more things, which I am not necessarily using it for right now. I've just started to kind of get into it and incorporate it into my system. But this was the first real kind of use case for me that I was like, oh yeah, that's doing something that I kind of always wanted to do, but I never really knew, like there wasn't a real easy way to do it. So yeah, it's very, very interesting for that. Now you can have it do different types of recording. Like it can be smooth, it can have steps, it can be, it can act almost like a sequencer, it can act as an attenuator. Like I said, if you have a signal going in and then going out, you can make that signal attenuate. You can also do regular, it's DC coupled, so it's not just control voltage, it can do audio signals as well. So you can have audio signals coming into those 4 channels and then have them go out to your mixer. And then you can record in volume automation of them too. Or you could just send out CV. If you've got VCAs in your mixer like I do here, you could just plug that into a volume or into the volume VCA here and then just automate it that way. And it basically is like if you had the slider being automated. So super functional, practical thing. Definitely going to stay in my case for a while because it's one of those things that just gives you like 4 extra hands. So if you're doing something, you don't have to plan it in advance, which is what I really like. And if you're doing something and you get an idea, you can just quickly patch it and then have the machine kind of keep doing that thing for you that you were doing before. So I love the fact that you don't have to pre-plan it and pre-think it out. You can just do it, record it, and then move on. And so you can keep moving things really quickly. So that said, jump into the chat. And if you have any questions about that or the rig or the courses or music in general or whatever, I'm happy to answer those. So put those in the chat and also let me know where you are coming from. Let's see here. Hey, what's going on? Jim from New Jersey. Nice. Nice to meet you. Greetings from Spain. Awesome. Where in Spain? Where are you in Spain? I'm excited. I'm going to Spain soon, so very excited about that. Let's see. Love my Shockbot modules. Great quality. Yeah, their build quality is great. And I have now the battering ram, the Archer's rig, and the Griffin's claws. All 3 have been phenomenal. Like the quality of what they do in their modules is really, really good. I mean, most modules and most modular companies are really good, but these guys, they really pay a lot of attention to detail. They're very, very kind of focused on making sure that everything is dialed in a way that is really performative. Francois that started this company is a live performer himself. And I think that very much like the guys from BoardBrain, the guys from WMD, they come at it very much from a performance perspective in Shockbot, and actually all 3 of those companies do. And so they're not so much just about making sounds or having modular be sound design stuff or having it be studio tools or whatever. It's very much about being playable and performative. So between WMD and BoardBrain and Shockbot, they're all very much that way. They're all very much focused on live performance and having things be functional and useful and playable and not kind of get in the way of a creative flow, but really encourage the creative flow. So yeah, I'm a big fan of all the stuff that they do as well. Let's see what else. James, what's going on? James, a former student. Casper, hello, nice to see Digitakt there, but how do I implement that into modular from Norway? Hey, awesome. Well, So I actually, it's not that I integrate it into the modular. For me, the way I kind of use everything in the setup is that in my case, I have a kick and a hi-hat, so the battering ram and the archer's rig. Other than that, everything that is drums and percussion is coming from the Digitakt, because I love sequencing in the Electron sequencer for drums and percussion. I love it as a one-shot instrument, a one-shot sample player. It's really great for that, being able to use all of like the parameter locks and all of that stuff. So that's how I'm using it. And then the audio signal comes out from this and it goes into the Exelon XI3, which is an expander for the Exelon mixer. So it's got 3 channels that have, they share the sends with the main mixer, and then they have a volume knob rather than having faders. They don't have pan, they don't have gain. But what's great is being able to bring in exterior instruments or external instruments with those. So I bring the Digitakt signal into the mixer, and so that way it can run out the mains through the Oxymeta performance effects, and then that goes out through the analog heat and then out to the house. So it's not so integrated into the modular, it's more like a companion of the modular. Where it's integrated is audio signal coming in, like this whole bottom row is basically mixing, and so it's coming in through the mixing section so that I can send things to the different effect sends, and then through performance effects. So that's what that's for. Also, the Digitakt, I'm using this, so basically channels 1 through 12 now, I'm using for drums and percussion. 1 through 8 are kind of like my standard layout that I've had forever for drums and percussion about where things go. Then 9 through 12 I'm using as more percussive elements, a lot of kind of organic samples from like bongos and some other types of percussion instruments from around the world. So I really like that kind of stuff. And those are in that section. So basically 9 through 12, and then also 3 and 4 are all percussion, pure percussion instruments. And then 13 through 16, I'm now using for vocal samples. You notice the black box is out of the rig for the moment because I found a way to do the vocal samples here that worked really well for what I'm doing. So I don't need them to be necessarily time stretched, and they don't need to be sequenced in time. I can just loop them as kind of a free flowing loop behind what I do. So I have a few samples in there. So like if we were kind of cruising along, they kind of loop in the background. So if I was to go to the mixer page, I can just bring in So this vocal loop is set up to, it's got a trigger on the first step of the pattern, and that trigger is set to only happen the first time through and then never happen again. But the sample itself is set to be a forward looping sample. So it triggers once and then it forever loops in the background. So whenever I want to, I can bring this in with a fader and it'll just loop in the background. And then I've got a few others like that as well.
Enhancing mood and fostering a sense of euphoria. Genres, complex layers, and sound textures can stimulate cognitive processes.
So another spoken word vocal that's in the background. So 13 through 16 are all vocal samples like that. So yeah, basically 1 through 12 drum and percussion, and then 13 through 16 are all vocal samples that go on in the background. And those go again into the mixer and then out through the performance effects, through the analog heat and out. So that's how I'm using the Digitakt. Let's see, what else do we have here? Mike, what's going on? Good to see you. Mercia, nice. We are actually thinking about going to spend a good amount of time in that area, potentially moving there. So we might be neighbors at some point. That would be very cool. Florence, Italy, beautiful, awesome. Do you lean more into modulation in your performances, filter envelope manipulation, etc., or do you lean more on patterns, notes, MIDI? I would say much more into modulation than into patterns, notes, MIDI. And Reason being, you know, the style of music that I'm doing, the style of kind of hypnotic techno that I do, I feel very strongly that it's about, you know, 60, 70% like drum groove that kind of keeps things moving. And then the majority of the rest of it is sound design. So I will have some very simple things going on, like melodically. So for example, so we may just have like a drum groove here. Let's put a little percussion. So this can kind of go on for a little while. But then I might add in something really simple, like a single note, but with effects, right? Like, so you can see it can be very simple in the background, kind of melodically. So I don't need to change up patterns as much, although I do. And that's one of the reasons why I use the Oxy, is because it's just really easy to change things up. So like that pattern that we have looping on 5 right now, I could change that and have that be an 8-step pattern and do. So you can do something that's very simple, but then you can kind of design sounds around it that make it more interesting. So again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It needs to be interesting, right? So you can do like compelling drum grooves and things that kind of keep you moving from a groove standpoint. And then you can add in very simple tonal melodic elements over the top. And that's one of the things that is kind of a trademark of the kind of music that I do, but it's also something that works to make it a bit easier to do in a live setting, because you're not worried so much about, you know, multiple melodies and interlocking and having broad frequency spectrum items playing huge pads that you then need to figure out a processing way to get things out of the way of the things that you've stacked on top of each other. And it just becomes a kind of a cluttered mess when you're trying to do that kind of stuff. And it makes it much more of a challenge to do using the hardware. And so it's one of the reasons why I kind of lean towards the things that I do, is because they're a lot easier to make those sounds that I use in the type of music that I'm doing. So yeah, definitely more on the manipulation, modulation side of things, and less on the melodic side of things, and kind of melodies and MIDI sequences and things like that that can get complicated very quickly. I prefer to keep those things very simple. Something else I do as well to keep things really simple is I tend to stick to monophonic voices for the most part. I have one polysynth in here right now that I just put in for this show this last weekend, but it's about to come out. That one, one of the reasons why I don't use polyphonic stuff is because that takes up a lot of frequency spectrum, and because I don't have the way to do like, you know, sidechain by track. I can't move things out of the way once they're in the way, once they're on top of each other. And so polyphonic instruments tend to take up too much sonic space. And so this way I can keep them out of the way, so I don't have to worry about processing them after the fact, if that makes sense. So let's see here. Where are we next? Hey, what's going on? Played a set last weekend, inspired by your improv workflow. Awesome, thanks. But with the Oxy1, Digitone 2, Digitakt 2, it was a lot of fun and learned a ton. Awesome. Yeah, they're great instruments. And I think that, I was talking to somebody recently, actually, in one of my courses, that you could do a whole live set with just like one hardware box. And especially if you're using something like an external sequencer like the Oxy, because then you've got this as like a 16 voice multi-synth or sampler, and then you can do a lot of control of that using an external controller. And so it just gives you so much freedom. Like with this, I'm controlling mostly the modular, but sometimes I do control the electron boxes with it too. And yeah, it just gives you a lot of flexibility. So glad you were able to do that. That's very cool. Let's see, Mike, did I dream this, or are you releasing a battering ram sample pack? Yes, I am still planning to do that at some point, actually. I have a lot of stuff recorded. I just haven't had the time to divide it all up, but I will. Let's see, I'm setting up a live set in Ableton with a Fader Fox and T1 for control of the instrument racks. I like finding inspiration among modular sets. Yeah, it's, computers and DAWs, they have so much more capability than what hardware can do. And I am not one of those people that's like, oh, you have to be hardware. Like I'm a big believer of use whatever you want to use. Like whatever inspires you musically, whatever gives you a creative idea, whatever is a thing that you enjoy working with and that you can get good at and that you practice and that you kind of build up your skills with. And if that's Ableton with a controller, amazing. If that's a modular, amazing. If it's a groove box, amazing. Whatever works best for you, use that. Everybody, I'm a big advocate for use whatever inspires you. Use whatever is the thing that you have fun playing, because ultimately, you can't forget that the point of all this in general is to enjoy it. It's to have fun. And so if you have a workflow that you found that works great for you and that makes you enjoy it and have a great time, awesome. Do that workflow, whatever it is. And it's cool because with you can make software and a DAW and all of that stuff sound just like hardware, and in much better in many cases, because you've got a lot of like processing per channel and things like that. What you miss, and the reason why I don't use software when I perform live, is because I like the hands-on aspect of it. And you can get some of that from MIDI controllers, but it's a bit different. Like I like the inspiration of how each individual module inspires me because of the way it's set up, because of how the interface works, because of how the controls are. And that for me is a thing I take inspiration from while I'm performing. And when I'm looking at a MIDI controller where like everything is exactly the same and then I have to remember what page I'm on and things like that, that's less inspiring for me. But if that works for you, that's awesome, because then you get to harness the power of the software, which is actually way more powerful than the hardware. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm all for it, actually. Let's see. Evening, watching from Coventry, UK. Welcome. You're not using the II headphones anymore. Seeing your different headphones every time lately. Yeah, I have a lot of headphones. So I have been actually performing lately with these in-ear monitors, and it's been making a huge difference for me. I have certain frequency ranges that I don't hear as well as others. And a lot of times with monitoring in a live performance, as well as even with headphones, I don't get the same sound quality. With this, I can get really detailed sound quality and keep the volume very low. So I'm not messing with my hearing even worse. And I'm still able to hear a lot of detail. So I started using in-ear monitors about a month ago and have been kind of trying to practice with them as much as I can at home so that when I'm playing shows, it's not like a totally awkward new scenario. So that's why I'm using that. I do still have, here I can pull these off their little case, maybe? Yeah. So I do still have these, the III headphones. I also have my DJ headphones, which are these Pioneer, huge fan of Pioneer headphones. And then I have a pair of Bear Dynamic monitoring headphones that I use when I'm mixing. So yeah, a lot of different headphones, but the in-ear monitors I've been using a lot more lately just because I prefer the detail of sound, kind of not having outside sounds in my head. Let's see what else. Any word, sorry, I missed this. Any word when the Exelon XI3 might be released? I thought they already released it, or if not, it's coming out, imminently. Like it's, when I was at their workshop, I don't know, a month ago, it seemed like they were getting real close to being able to ship those out. So I would say anytime, just keep an eye on the BoardBrain website, and I'm sure they'll announce it pretty soon. But yeah, it should be released pretty soon. Don't forget to strike that like. Yes, thank you. What's your process for transitions? Just strip away elements, or does your rack have DJ-like mixer? Great question, and it's great because it's something that I've thought about a lot with this. And basically, the way I perform, I don't really do transitions, and I can explain that a little bit more. So transitions are really important if you are pre-preparing music before you do a live performance, and you've got track A and you've got track B, and you need to figure out how to get from track A to track B, how to transition from one to the other. My live sets are 100% improvised. I have sounds, obviously, in my modular case. I have samples set up in my Digitakt, but other than that, I don't have anything pre-prepared, right? So I don't have any saved patterns. Like if you go into the save section here, I don't even know what these are, but so like I don't have any pattern saved. I don't have any songs saved, nothing like that, because everything I'm doing, I'm writing live in the moment as I perform. And so because of that, I'm not transitioning in the traditional sense where I'm going from a whole song, organized structure, group of sounds, all of that, and then changing over to another one, because I come from 30 years of DJing, and when I started performing live, I kind of wanted to get as far away from that as I could. And for me, that pre-preparing tracks and mixing from one to the other just felt like DJing, but in a more kind of clunky way. Like if I want to do that, I'll DJ. Like I'll bring a USB stick and have it be the easiest way to do that, and I'll mix from one track to another. With this, what I tend to do is the transitioning I'm doing is by individual element. So example, so let's say I'm playing this and I want to do something where I want to make my kick more dramatic, because it's kind of a muffled sounding kick right now. Right, it's a little bit kind of darker and groovier, right? I have a kick module that allows me to make it into other things. So I might shorten up the decay and increase the transient and increase the drive. And now I have a new kick, right? I don't need to go to another kick, a different one. I can use this same one. If I'm using this sound and I want to have it, and I want to go to a different sort of bass sound, then maybe I'll just transition to a different sound. So I can switch to a different bass, and I can do that while having now it's a totally different type of song idea. rather than going from one song specifically to another song specifically. Everything is slowly morphing and modulating throughout a show. So then let's say I wanted to bring in a different type of sound. And then let's say we were going to continue to change up the bass line and go back to something from this instrument. And if I want to change up my kick pattern, I can just do it in the sequence. Now it's a totally different song idea. So that's one of the keys to the style that I do, is that I'm transitioning individual elements one by one, and it's kind of this ever-evolving thing where a live set for me, whether it's an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, it doesn't really matter. For me, it's basically one continuous song that's just evolving over the course of that time, and I'm transitioning from ideas and moods and motifs from one to the other, but it's never a kind of a straight transition track A to track B. I don't prepare anything in advance like that. So goods and bads about that. You have to kind of keep coming up with ideas, but at the same time, you never have to hassle with how do I get from A to B. I can just slowly change things up. So anyway, that's how I do that. Let's see what else we have here. How do you tame the Bastl pizza? I have it in my rig as well, but I find it hard to get anything decent usable out of it. It's funny. The pizza is one of those modules that I absolutely love because of the amount of variety of sounds that I can get out of it. But one thing that was a challenge for me at the beginning is I learned that you have to be really super subtle with the movements, because every movement is a dramatic change of sound. And so, like, again, if we go back to our little groove here, take that out. I'll make my kick a little more subtle again so that it stays a little more out of the way. So if we bring back in the pizza, I'll just do a little quick pattern here. Pitch it up a little. So a couple things. Because it's an FM synth, you're modulating frequencies between a modulator and a carrier. So I can change this index very subtly. So if you think about this like a clock face, right now it's at about 11 o'clock. That's 10 o'clock. So that's one notch, 1/12 of the difference. If you go to 9 o'clock, it's a very dramatically different sound, and keep going around. And then go back. So that's just the index modifier, right? Which is also on this slider here. Or you can tame it way down. So that's just that part. Then I set up the control knob here to use the internal envelope. You can have it be different things. You can have it control different things on the face. I like using it as the envelope. So what this does is obviously shortens things, and then you can lengthen the envelope. And if you do it on the other side, it adds attack as well. And then on the slider here, you can adjust a bunch of different things. And I usually leave it on the wave. So it's adjusting the type of sound wave that is modulating the other oscillator. So you can go to, so this is more, a more kind of triangle sawtooth styles, more triangular. In the center's more sine. And on the other side is more square wave. And again, adjusting the index makes those talk to each other differently. So right now we're on square wave. If we move to sine, and then if we move to triangle / sawtooth, whatever. So that's kind of the realm that I leave this in. And then I put it, because it's an FM synth and it can sound really digital and really kind of metallic, I put it through a WMD carbon filter, which kind of takes the edge off and makes it sound a little bit, I don't know, less perfect, if that makes sense. Sonic variety in one module. So that's why it's kind of one of my main go-tos. So then once it goes through the carbon filter, I have it going through an FXAid multiprocessor. So it's got a reverb and a delay on it. So if this is just dry signal, that's just the dry signal. But then with a little bit of reverb and delay. Can dial it in and make it sound pretty sweet. So yeah, the pizza it's a challenging module because of the amount of variety and because of how small things are in the module. Every tiny little movement dramatically changes the sound. And so it's hard because in some modules, like you're like twisting knobs and throwing faders, and it's like you can do these big movements. And with that one, you got to be like, okay, for this, I'm just going to be like tiny little movement because that's all I want to do in order to keep it subtle. So yeah, the pizza can be a challenge, but it's, if you just practice with kind of really super small manipulations, if you're doing automated modulation, so like if you've got LFOs controlling any of those things, make sure you put them through attenuators before they go in and turn those way down. So you're only getting really super subtle movements, because if you've got a full oscillation of an LFO, it's going to go like, it's going to sound awful. It's just going to be all over the place. So try to keep things as subtle as you can. And that's for me kind of the secret to the pizza. So what else we got going here? Otis, thank you. Awesome. I appreciate that. Amazing insight. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you liked it. Appreciate it. Let's see. Setting up the mod wheel for each track in the Oxy multitrack using the mod wheel macro setup on the digiboxes allowed for some less fiddly live sound design. Yes, I agree. Totally. Totally. That's one of the cool things with the way that you can do the different kinds of modulation in the Digitakt, especially now with this new update. It allows you to kind of control externally a whole bunch of really cool stuff. So yeah, it's opened up a whole bunch of stuff. Hey, what's going on, Ed? Ed from Houston. Yeah, Ed is another former student of mine. Speaking of that, if you're interested in doing either one of my courses, I do an improvised live performance course and a hybrid production course, which talks about using live performance hardware in kind of some cool ways in order to improve your productions in the DAW. So using hardware with the DAW, using what you make in the DAW in your hardware, how to kind of get the best of both worlds, so you're not kind of handicapping yourself by only doing one or only doing the other. It's kind of how to work those together. There's an April course which starts, it goes live the 3rd, so this coming Thursday, and then the first of the group calls is going to be on the 6th. The video portion of the course has over 50 videos that are unique to that are really specific to a progression that we go through in the course. It's kind of a system for how to set up and practice and kind of get yourself into a mode to be able to do improvised performance rather than just pre-prepared performance. And so you have like 50 videos, and then there are, the course goes for 1 month. There's twice a week. We do a video call over Zoom with the whole group, and we'll talk about each of the different sections on a different call. Those are Wednesdays and Sundays. And if you can't make it to the call, we record them so then you can watch the recorded version of it. You also get access to a private online group of all the people that have taken the courses, which is cool because that way you can kind of help each other and learn from each other. You get weekly feedback on a video of yourself doing live performance or production, whichever one of the courses that you're doing. And then you also, included in the cost of the course, you get a 1-hour one-on-one with me where we can do over Zoom. We do whatever you want to do. We can go over specific pieces of gear. I can work with you through something that you're working on. We can, talk about how to use the Oxy or how to patch your modular or whatever it's the most effective for you at whatever your level is. So there's the April course, like I said, is enrolling right now. There's still a few spots available for each one of the courses, and that's going to be the last course until later on summer. So if you're interested in doing it, go ahead and jump in now, and we'll see you in the course. We'd love to have you there. So what else? Any other questions that you guys have, please pop them in the chat and let me know what you want to chat about. Yeah, always happy to answer whatever questions about the rig or performances or the courses or anything else. But like as we started off today, I really wanted to talk about the Griffin's clause just because it's such not only is it an interesting module, but something that it's kind of out of the ordinary for me, because I don't usually use a lot of modulation modules, because like I said, when you're improvising, you don't know what you're going to be doing at any given moment in a performance. So it's really difficult to set up modulation in advance because you're going to want it to be timed to whatever you're doing. There's kind of a crazy number of patch points that you can patch modulation into. So you can't possibly have everything ready for any kind of scenario. And so because of that, I tend to stay away from modulation in general in my performance case, other than manipulation that I do on my own, knob twisting. And that was what was so cool when the Griffin's clause came out. I was like, oh, this is for me something that's in the middle. It allows me to have modulation that can happen automatically without me doing it, but it's modulation that I can set up instantly in the moment and then have it repeat as long as I want, and then I can use that patch cord for something else later. And so I've got 4 channels on here that I could have 4 different things going at once. And when I play, if you guys can see down here, I generally have some patch cables just laying here on the table or sometimes hanging around my neck. when I play, and it's just for that reason. Like if I come up with an idea while I'm playing, it's easy to patch it quick. And now with the Griffin's clause, to be able to patch that and then have it continue things that I was doing before, it's really very interesting. So another quick example of that. So kind of cruising along, and let's say with the BIA, we can put in to the decay of that one, and then we can bring that up. So obviously short decay, so I can do it here, or now I can do it with the slider. And so if I like that, I can go ahead onto channel 2, hit record. And then let it go. And now that'll keep going just like that. And then if I want, I can patch something else into something else. So let's go into channel 3, and let's go into, I don't know, into the morph control here. And so now those can be changing all that sound up. And then I can move on to something else. So it's a really super quick way to be able to kind of patch and record in automation, to be able to like have it do something for you. So like it's kind of like if you think about when you're doing something and you ask somebody, hey, can you hold this for me? And then you go on to doing the next thing. That's kind of how I'm feeling with the Griffin's clause. It's like I'm doing this thing and I want to do something else. So I'm like, oh, hey, will you hold this for me? Here we go. Okay, let's just record that in. Now that's good. Now I can go on to And before, the only way I could do what I'm doing right now is if I would have set up this modulation in advance using, say, an LFO with an attenuator, figuring out exactly the timing that I wanted, and then having that set to kind of repeat, and then it would be set to do that thing. But unfortunately, it would do that thing always, right? It wouldn't be able to be turned on and off. And with this, I can just have this going when I want to, and then when I'm done with it, I can move that to something else. Or you can actually, here, let's go back to this again. Another thing that you can do is that you can kind of take over control. So let's say I don't want the decay to be here anymore. Right? So then you can have it be, it can be back into control. So you get a lot of flexibility with it to be able to do whatever pops into your head. And so again, that lends itself really well to the style of performance that I do, because I'm improvising, I'm writing it on the fly. And so there's no way I could have known in advance that I wanted it to do those things. And to be able to have something like this where you can actually set how much offset each one of the faders has. So you can have it be really super subtle movements, you can have it be really dramatic movements. So if you set those things, once you set those things, then you can have all different types of movement. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility within those 4 channels. So then you've got 4 things that you couldn't have done before. So now I can have like interesting modulation in this sound that I wouldn't have normally been able to have otherwise. So I don't know. It's for me, it's one of those things like, every once in a while a piece of gear comes out and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted, but I didn't know that I wanted it. And that was kind of how I feel about this one, is that it came out and I was like, oh, damn, like now I want another one, because it's like, oh, well, I can do this with it and this with it. I love the fact that you can do audio modulation with it too, or you can send it into an individual thing. So let's, for example, here, I'll just patch another one. So we've got all sorts of cool stuff here. Patch another one in there, and I'm going to patch this into the VCA of, actually, let's go into the BIA here. So then, so I can turn the BIA all the way down, and this now becomes my volume fader. And then if I want to record that, I actually didn't record that right. I didn't have this one set up correctly. Now I can do it here. I can let that play, and that can change because I have a VCA in here. I can have that be all the way down and have this impact that, or this also acts as an offset. So if I was to turn this up, it goes even higher, right? So you have a lot of flexibility again with all of this stuff. So again, this is why stuff like this for me is really super interesting, because it's a workflow that's really made for improvising, made for doing stuff live on the fly. Now, that said, you could totally use this for whatever you wanted to use it for. If you were doing something that you were doing pre-prepared, where you could set this up as, recorded offset or recorded attenuation or recorded audio signal or any of those things, you can set those things up in advance and totally use it that way. For me, my use case is going to be just like this, to be able to, like, I have an idea and like, oh, okay, patch, and now that idea is recorded. And it's, like I said, it's that idea of, here, hold this for me while I do something else. And this is kind of going to keep doing those things while I move on to doing another thing. So it's going to give me a lot more flexibility in my live sets, just in one little module like that. So anyway, let's see what else we have here. Looking to start learning Ableton this year. What Ableton version will be sufficient when learning mostly on hardware as sound sources? So anyway, so with Ableton, I mean, you can get just the light version that comes with a lot of MIDI controllers, and it comes with them for free, so you don't really have to spend anything. It gives you a limited number of tracks, and you don't have the full library of plugins that's available. But I would suggest definitely start with that, just to get used to it and get comfortable with it before you spend any money on it. And then once you're into it and you like it and you like the workflow and you're sure that it's the DAW that you want to do, I always suggest to people that you jump from that free version all the way to the Suite version. And the reason being is that Suite opens up, kind of this crazy amount of Max for Live devices that the kind of Ableton community makes for it. So people make them on their own. There's software in there to be able to make your own. And then you can go in and there's kind of devices, plug-in devices for everything. So it is a bigger initial investment to get the Suite version. But if you think about how much individual plugins cost, and for a vast majority of them are free in the Max for Live kind of universe. So you can go in and you can get, things that would normally be, $30, $50, $100, $200 for an individual plugin. You can get those for free if you get the Max for Live thing. So I would say don't spend any money and get the light version to make sure it's what you really want. And then once it's what you really want, go for the full Suite version, and it's amazing. It'll be everything you ever need. You don't ever need to buy any external plugins. You can kind of use them all in there. So I would go that route if it was me. So let's see. Hey, what's going on, Mark? Synth Dad, good to have you on here. Hey, Griffin's Claws is amazing. I will tell you that mine arrived late. And so as soon as I got it, I was trying to figure out how to set it up and how to use it. So I watched your video and it was super helpful. So if you want to get some more insight into how the Griffin's Claws works and all the different functionality of it, watch Synthad's video on it, because it basically taught me everything that I needed to know, and I didn't need to change, like, I didn't need to dig too deep into the manual. I do need to change some of the settings now that I know what I want to do with it. That's why one of the channels wasn't acting the same way, because I was playing around with different ways to set it up. Because again, one thing I want to try to avoid, and this goes for kind of all the modules that I have, is I want to try to avoid changing settings and changing kind of the setup of the module while I'm performing. I like to manipulate them, I like to use them, but I like to kind of set it up in a way where I have a few controls that I use. So like with the Griffin's Claws, it'll be the faders, record, and erase. That's kind of as far as I want to go in live performance, because I don't want to kind of disconnect for the crowd and be sitting there kind of like micromanaging settings. I just want to set it up in a certain way. Same thing with the Noisite Warp, which is relatively new to me as well. Super crazy deep sound design module, but what's cool about it is that you spend all this time designing sounds, saving kind of groups of things that work together. And then when it comes time to play, you never have to go into those at all. Then it's all macro knobs on the outside. So like what I was just doing before. So with this, you can do things like, you've got a filter cutoff here and a decay. So you can do things like, it's like building that sound, getting the macro set up takes a long time, but once it's there, then you've got a lot of really performative controls once you're playing it. But the setup, again, takes a long time. It's amazingly deep. The manual for that is like more than 100 pages, and then there's a 2-hour-long video that accompanies the manual, and that even doesn't do the whole thing. I mean, that just kind of scratches the surface. So it's a crazy deep module, but I love it for the immediacy that it has once it's set up. So I would equate it to kind of like the Octatrack. Giant pain in the butt to set up the Octatrack and get everything set the way you want. But then once it's set up, it's super playable and performative live. But you have to put in the time in advance to get it to that point. And I think the Warp is very much that way. The Griffin's Claws is, I'm going to use it in a pretty simple way, so it won't be that deep. But as with any deep module, if I decide that I want to use it a different way at another time, all that capability is still there. I can still use it in other ways if I choose to. Live performance wise, this is how I'll use it. But as you guys, I think you can, you can see, I have a big case right over here. Here, I will take this out of the way. So this whole case right here is it's kind of like a library case for me, where I can even tip this up so you can see it more. So that's like my library of modules that I don't use live, right? So often I'll kind of patch between these two things and I'll have them talking to each other, and I'll go, you know what? I love how I'm using this module with the live setup. So then I'll swap it in to do with something. Same thing with the Griffin's Claws. I can see this as something that I would use over here and go, oh, you know what? I'm going to use it in a totally different way for that. But then I'm going to go back to kind of my traditional setup for live performance. So yeah, it's, I love modules like this that are super flexible. You can do a lot of stuff. I mean, that's kind of the common theme today, is things like Griffin's Claws, the Warp, the battering ram is able to be all these different kicks. The Archer's rig can be all these different hats as well as different percussive elements. The Pizza can be a ton of different sounds. I use it for basses and leads and anything really. And so for me, that's a real value per HP in a modular case that lends itself to my type of live performances. Because this case is as big as I can go and still have it be a carry-on. So everything needs to fit into this case. So if something's going to come in, something has to go out. So it really needs to kind of earn its spot here. So that's why having these things the way they are set up is because these are the things that I really do use every day. And the things that are, I don't know, most effective for me for the style that I play. So anyway, let's see. You're welcome. You know, your video was awesome, Mark. I gotta tell you, I loved it. It was like so much like to the point, super simple, really easy to understand. And yeah, it's like, I mean, your videos are always like that. So I love it. But yeah, it was very helpful to get me to kind of how to set things up and how to get it working the way I wanted to at first. And now I'm sort of playing around with it saying, oh, I want to know how to do this a little better, and then I can dive a bit deeper into it. But yeah, no, it was awesome. Let's see here. Hey, Michael, what's going on? Digitakt 2 is back. Yes, it is. Is the loop stretching working for you? No, still not great. Still a bit glitchy, but I don't need it because I just set my loops up in a little bit different way. I'm not doing any more percussive loops, which are the ones that really need time stretching. I'm just doing actually sequenced percussion in here. So like stuff like. And I brought in a bunch more like kind of organic instruments. So that way I don't need to do any of the percussion loops. And those are the ones that really need to be time stretched and be really precise, obviously because of the rhythms that they do. So yeah, for those ones, I'm not using the percussion stuff anymore. So with these, it's just vocals. And so that way I'm able to just do a single trigger and then have the vocal kind of constantly loop. And then I can just bring it back in using just by fading it in. And then it's just looping in the background because these don't need to necessarily be on time. I'm not sequencing them in time for anything. So yeah. Let's see, what else? What else do we have going here? Packing to travel with my gear for the first time. Hyped you on, was literally trying to channel you, breaking things down into a single smaller case and cable wrapping in channels like a maniac. Yeah, it's traveling with gear is a challenge. I actually did a whole live stream about that. So check it out on the video about how I pack. Sorry, this necklace is hitting my microphone. How I pack my gear to travel because needing to get everything into carry-on. So this case has been huge for that. It's the Morph modular case. And with this one, it's a folding case. So you see I can fold it up. And then this is 12U84 width. And because it's 84, it fits into a rolling carry-on. So I can close this up, put it into a rolling carry-on, and then I can roll it so I don't have to carry it on my shoulder, which I did for one trip and it was just a huge pain. And then all the There we go, back again. Sorry, battery died in my transmitter. So all the boxes then go into my backpack, personal item. So everything that you see here, so the 2 electrons, Oxy, modular case, and a few other little side deals, those all go in carry-on luggage. So that way, no matter where I travel, I can take it with me. I don't have to ever check anything, which scares me to death. So I don't do that. And having that limitation kind of, as I mentioned before, it kind of forces a bunch of the decision making for what I choose as far as gear and as far as modules within the modular, because I don't want to go any larger than this because then I wouldn't be able to have it be carry on. So yeah, everything kind of has to earn its spot. And then if I want to put something new in the case, I have to figure out what's coming out of the case to take its spot. So for example, in this last show that I played, because it was a little bit more atmospheric, because I was playing the opening, so I wanted a little bit more atmospheric sounds at the beginning, I put in the polycinematic, so I would have a polyphonic voice that I could do some interesting things with. But I won't normally use that in my performances. So I took out the Erica Synth's bass line and put this in. And so this one is actually going to come out in a week or so, because I'm getting another new module from Shockbot, which is exciting. It'll be a final test. It's not out yet, but you'll be able to see it. You can actually see there's some articles written on it already, because they had it at Superbooth last year as a prototype. It's also, you can see it on Modular Grid as well if you want to see the specs of it, but it's the Ballista Blast, it's called, and it's an FM wavetable and digital voice that has a built-in, 2 built-in filters and low pass gate. So it's all in one voice and very small profile. So I'm excited to get that into the case, to try it out for some more kind of interesting sound design stuff that really fits with the style of sounds that I'm using. So that'll be exciting. And then eventually at some point, my guess is that the Swarm will probably come out, just because it takes up so much space for just being one mono voice. I love it. And especially with the sequencer built in, that is not, I don't have it quantized to anything. So I like the kind of chaotic randomness that it does, but it may come out in order to make some room for some other stuff. We'll see. I have my eye on the Erica Synth's Percons voice, so I want to put that in here at some point, but we'll see. Anyway, so that's kind of how I decide what goes in here and able to be packed in the correct way. Let's see here. Hey, Peter, what's going on? How much do you have to unplug with the case when you pack it up? Good question. So I have 2 cables right here, which are my inputs from the Digitakt. I have 1 cable here, which is a kick out, which is going into here to trigger the sidechain. Then there's a HDMI cable that comes to the Oxy, which connects this to all of the CV that stays patched. So I just, when I'm done, I take this 1 cable out. When I show up at the gig, I plug 1 cable in, and that plugs all of this into this, just with 1 cable. So that's great. And then let's see, main outs here. And then I have a clock that goes into the PAMs from the Oxy, and then that stays patched, clocked to everything else. So basically 4 audio cables, 1 HDMI, and 1 clock. So really I can set up in, once everything's plugged in to power supplies and stuff like that, I can be set up in 5 minutes. It's really super quick. Other than that, everything else stays plugged. That's one of the cool things with cases like this, is that when it closes patched so that it's not, there's space underneath, like there's space between. It doesn't close it down all the way, so it doesn't crush your cables, and it allows it to stay patched, and then you just kind of open it up and then it's already ready to go. So yeah, super handy. So only basically, if I didn't have the external instruments coming into this, it would just be HDMI, clock, and output. But because I have an external instrument, that's what adds to that. So, but that's pretty much it. Let's see. I feel you on checking things. I dropped down to a single tip top Mantis so I can stuff it in their backpack. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, the case to fit in a case. This is the only, so it was a challenge. Prior to this, I was using just a 6U84, so the half the size of this case. And that fits in one side of a rolling carry-on, which is really handy for travel if you can get down to that size, because then you can use the other side for either other machines or cables or clothes or toiletries or whatever, put them in the other side, and you've got your whole modular just in one half of a carry-on. This one, because I doubled that, I needed to find a carry-on that this could fit into. So I found one that allows me to kind of expand it in order to close it over the case. And then I can zip down the expansion, and it goes down to kind of the small the smaller allowable carry-on. So like even on budget airlines like Ryanair and stuff like that, this is still carry-on size for them, which is amazing. So I can have this for carry-on, and then the rest in a backpack as a personal item, and then I don't have to check anything. So yes, definitely a big plus. Peter, you're building a case as you watch this right now. Awesome. Getting into the craziness of modular. Super fun. Yeah, so anyway, if you have other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Always happy to answer whatever. So, and then I'll go through just a little bit more about some of the stuff that I was doing differently for the show that I just played this past Friday, and how it's kind of changing up a little bit the style that I'm interested in playing right now. So it's the theme of the event was Hypnotic, and the idea was that it was all things hypnotic. So it wasn't just hypnotic techno. It was but it was very much techno leaning, but it was things that were a bit more ambient, things that were a bit more atmospheric, even if that was dancey. So if that makes sense. So that kind of led me towards what I'm doing here in this case. One of the keys to that is being able to use the effects in a way that kind of augments what you're doing with the regular instruments. Let me just make sure these settings are correct here so I can show you. Ooh. I have a bad cable somewhere, I am sure. If I have anything going into that. Weird. So anyway, I'll have to figure out what that is cable-wise, but just to... That's loud. I'm going to turn this off just for a second and see if there's just like static buildup here. Yep, that's what it was. Gotta love voltage. It's one of the things with modular is that everything is voltage. So when you have signals crossing over each other or constantly pumping into something, you end up with weird sounds all the time. So all of that was static buildup. So sometimes if you cycle your kit, it'll release the static that's in there. So that whole sound is gone now. That was all coming from the Endorphins Ghost. So speaking of that, so let's talk a little bit about the sounds that we were doing during the performance. So again, having things be more groovy and atmospheric met more subtle kick drums. So it's not like this kind of dramatic crazy kick drum. It's less transient, less drive, less depth of envelope, a little bit more decay. So it kind of keeps that kick here. If I take off these extra sounds, it's a little bit more boomy, a little bit more low end, kind of like a more 808 sounding, but still having enough kind of low end pressure to make it sound good on a big system. And so great module, the battering ram that does that. Then I have, to kind of add to that bass groove, I have some sequenced elements in the Digitakt that are more kind of like subby, low, filtered down. One is a kick. So it's acting kind of like ghost kicks. And this is actually, if I turn the filter up, that's actually a sample from the battering ram. So I sampled that into here. So it acts kind of like those ghost notes. You can use velocity in here but I just like being able to do it here on a separate machine. So then I can do like probabilities and I can do all sorts of changes with it in a really easy way. So that's one low end. Then I've got another kind of a low tom sound. Which, that's just going on 16ths now. So again, this kind of helps create that low end groove. And if you find your kick gets buried when you bring in other low end like that, another great thing of something like the battering ram is you can just boost the transient. So it really punches through the sound because that transient's not in the low end with everything else, it's much higher up. And so it helps that whole low end of the kick come through without adding any more low end kind of clutter with everything else. So once you have kind of a low end groove going like this, then again, like that's why I have some of these percussive elements. So you bring in like, and this can already be kind of a cool groovy thing that you can dance to. Then we can bring in a hi-hat. So now with something like this acts as kind of like the structural foundation of things. It's groovy, makes you want to move, but it's subtle. It's not just like pounding in your face, super hard kicks, but it's something that's kind of, because there's a lot of low end, it loans itself to that kind of deeper sound. Then what I would do is I was bringing in other elements that were simple individual elements as far as melodically simple, but then I can make them complex with effects. So for example, going back to the pizza, because it's one of my favorite modules. So if we were just add in, let's just do a single note. Here, I'll put it on an offbeat. So it kind of adds to the bounce of things. And again, pizza's cool because you can switch octaves. So maybe I switch this a little lower. And then I've got filter. Let some of those higher sounds through. So this by itself is not super interesting, right? That one sound would get super monotonous over time. But if I put this through a send going into the ghost, which is in one unit, it's really an effects chain. So it's going through delay, reverb, overdrive, distortion, and a bandpass filter that has high resonance, so I can move that filter to pick out different harmonics and send those harmonics through the effects. So if I turn up this effect send, so everything other than the drum groove that you're hearing is that one single note from the pizza, but that's going through an effects chain. Now, if I was to turn up raise up the filter cutoff into the higher frequencies, and then I adjust something on the pizza where I allow through more of those higher frequencies, again, that's all still just one note, but going through effects processing. keep it relatively subtle so it doesn't get totally away from you. And then also, because it's on a send, I can send this hi-hat sound also through that and then move that up into the high frequencies and listen to what that does to the pattern of the hi-hat. Then let's make a subtle change. Actually, I'm gonna open up the filter a little just so you can hear it better. We'll make a subtle change in the pizza to a different wave. That hi-hat, if we're up in those higher frequencies, I can also do some kind of splashes of interest by opening up the decay. So it's not just that super tight hi-hat, it can do things like this. That's just adjusting the timing of the delay. Again, really subtle movements adds to that kind of hypnotic vibe and feel while you keep something repetitive in your drum groove. Now going back to the swarm, one of the things that I love about this is being able to, like I said, have that kind of chaotic randomness. So it almost acts like an arpeggiator because it's just an 8-step sequencer. And then you can go in and adjust the pitches on these, and because they're not quantested, and again, because the ghost effects chain is on a send, then I can send that to the Ghost now. And again, because of the flexibility of the pizza, now I can put it as like a rolling bass line. So you can see you have these kind of like looping, overlapping sounds, but none of it is really complicated as far as the individual elements, right? And that's part of what makes it challenging, is to make it as simple as possible while still being able to tell the story that you want to tell and elicit the emotions that you want to elicit and get people dancing and keeping them dancing. So being able to say as much as you can with as little as possible is kind of one of the hallmarks of this style. And it's something that I'm constantly trying to work towards. But a lot of it, like I said, comes from really purposeful drum grooves, and then the sound design stuff that's kind of evolving and changing subtly over time is kind of really the most important elements to this kind of stuff. So anyway, let's go back to the chat here. See what is going on. If you can meet Ryanair's carry-on, then you can meet anyone's. Absolutely. Yeah, I did check, and yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that you get the carry-on included, which is the Ryanair hallmark, is that you still have to pay for it. But what is cool is being able to do it if you need to. Let's see here. What's going to happen when Oxy One Mark II comes out? Well, I'm going to have to get one, I think, when it comes out. Let's see. Yeah, I'm excited to see if and when that's a thing. So. Let's see, I love the Swarm's polyphony MIDI mode. Yeah, honestly, I haven't used it that much because, like I mentioned, I stay away from polyphonic sounds because I find that I lose a lot of the control over my mix when I'm using polyphonic sounds, because they take up too much of the sound spectrum when you have multiple notes coming from one single instrument on one single channel. You lose the ability to individually control each one of those, kind of regions of the frequency spectrum. And so I tend to stick to vast majority monophonic voices, so I can do that. So like if I wanted to represent a chord, I could put, the 3 notes of a triad coming from 3 separate instruments, and that way I'd retain individual control over each one of where those fit into the frequency spectrum, rather than kind of overlaying it and then getting to the end and going, oh, my mix sounds all muddy. How do I fix it? How many more modules do I have to buy to run things through things in order to fix the mistake that I made in the first place? So I try to avoid stuff in the first place in order to not have to go back through and try to refix things after the fact. I think it's a bad habit that I got into, and I think a lot of us do, from doing stuff in the DAW, that you can be a lot sloppier about your song selection, or your sound selection, because you can always clean things up afterwards, right? You can put a sidechain compressor per channel. In many cases, you can link them together with other channels so that everything sidechains together. And so then it's just like, well, yeah, just slap it all in there and then duck it out of the way later. And I find with stuff like this, I have to be much more purposeful, because I can't do that after the fact. I don't have a sidechain per channel, per instrument. I don't have an EQ per channel. I don't have an EQ at all. And so in order to be able to clean things up, I don't have a lot of ways to clean things up after I've messed them up. So the idea is to try to be really tight with my sound selection, so that it takes up a really tight section of the frequency spectrum, so that I don't have to then concern myself too much with things overlapping and cluttering each other up. And it's a way for me to keep a mix really clean, without having to, spend too much work on it after the fact. I think it's the old ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of thing. So if you can prevent those things by staying away from busy sounds that have all this kind of wasted frequencies in it, it's just going to make your life a lot easier in the end. So anyway, let's see here. What effects do you have on the analog heat? So, good question. Effects, I don't really have any. They're basically all switched off. What I use the heat for is basically kind of an end of chain pseudo mastering in order to thicken up the sound and beef up the sound for bigger sound systems. So to do that, the only things that I'm really using in here is the heat circuit, which is the saturation circuit. Then I use the bass mono function that the Heat Plus Effects has. I use the drive. I use a high pass filter and some resonance. And then I use the high EQ in order to kind of help balance out the mix in the end. And then other than that, everything else is switched off. So all of the effects, for me, and I did a whole video about this, the Heat Plus Effects is a really interesting thing for me, because for me, it's kind of two units in one, and they both are good, but you can't really effectively use both of them at the same time. So you have the heat, the EQ part, the drive, and the bass mono, which all are really great at the end of the chain. And then you've got all of the other effects. So like the bit reduction and chorus and delay and reverb and the tape warble and compressor, all of those things are great as kind of individual instrument sound design tools. So if you want to really make a really cool sound and have it go through those effects, it's really great for that. But it's, in that case, it would be an insert or maybe a send. Whereas the ones that are really good for end of chain are just that. They're at the end of chain. They're after everything. And so if you're using the end of chain stuff and you try to put in the effects, they're not really functional with what you're doing with the rest of the sounds coming out there. And it gets pretty messy pretty quick. And if you're doing sound design with those things on an individual synth or on an individual sound, then you don't really need the end of chain stuff. You don't really need the bass mono and all that stuff, unless you have, an analog heat per track. Then you might want to do that stuff. But so for me, it tends to be it's two things in one, that for me, you don't really ever use together. So it makes it a flexible box to have as, you know, a piece of your studio or something that you use for live performance. So for example, if I wanted to put this, you know, I could connect this to, you know, on a send from my mixer, have it be on a send channel from Ableton. I could send things through effects or heat or anything like that and have them come back into the DAW, so to use as a production tool. And then when it came time to go to perform live, I could then switch it to the settings that I have right now. In a sense like that, it's really functional, kind of like the Octatrack, where it can be a different thing in different instances, but it can't be all the things at once. And I think the Heat Plus effects, for me, falls into that same category. It can do a lot of different things, but it doesn't functionally do them all at the same time. It does each one, or it does certain ones in different use cases, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. But so I use it as an end of chain kind of mastering. So if you listen, let's go back to our little. So like, let's say we've got some little groove going like this. This is going through the Heat Plus effects. Now, if I disengage it, if I take the button for active and I just take it off, listen to what it does to the sound overall. So that's that same mix at virtually the same level. There's almost no level reduction. That loudness that you hear is just perceived loudness that's coming from the saturation. So this is without it, and then this is back with it again. So I have it set to boost the low end between 25 and 40 hertz. So you get a much better low end kind of rumbly sound. If you're listening on the headphones, you'll hear that. The saturation circuit, which is giving it a lot of that fullness and a greater perceived loudness. And then because I boosted the low end and I cut all of the frequencies below 20 hertz, then I add some high end using the EQ, kind of like a high shelf, in order to balance it out. So I've got a boosted low and a boosted high, and that dips the mids just a little bit, and that helps to clean up a mix. Where the clutter tends to come in like the low mids, and so if you can have the lows and the highs higher than that and then bring your whole level down, then it's the same as if you scooped out the mids. So that's kind of what I do with this. And you know, it really, as you can hear, I'll switch it again, you can hear how much it helps with that perceived loudness. Like the output volume is, as far as the decibel peak, is not that much lower. It's just a couple decibels lower, but the perceived loudness is a giant difference. And what that's coming from is all of the added harmonics from the saturation and the drive coming from below that kind of decibel peak. So all those harmonics in there fill out the sound and make it sound louder. So that's why they call it perceived loudness, because it's not actually getting louder like on a decibel scale. It's just getting the perception of volume is getting louder, just because there's more harmonics filling up every possible space in the frequency spectrum below that kind of decibel peak. So that's why that's so important. So it's a really important thing for me if I'm going to be playing on a big system. So if I'm going to a place where I know they have a really good low end and I know that there's a lot of power in the system and the system's really clean, I'll definitely use the heat so that I can make the most of the sound system. If I'm going to a place that doesn't have subs, or if I'm just playing like a demo or something and it doesn't, I'm not playing on a system where you can hear all that stuff, I wouldn't even bring it, because it doesn't really make that much difference unless it's on a really big system. And then it just kind of beefs stuff up a lot more. So yeah, so that's how I use the Heat Plus effects. And the only reason why I use the Heat Plus effects, if I'm not using all the effects, is because it has the bass mono. So that allows me to choose a frequency crossover where everything below that number is summed to mono, so that I can put all of my low end, kick, bass, all that stuff in mono. So it gives it more power on a big system. and keeps things from phase shifting in a room and having dead spots as you move around a room. And then everything above that cutoff stays in stereo, although I try to keep everything in mono anyway, just so it sounds better on a club system. I try to avoid stereo almost at all costs because it can really mess things up in a nightclub. But it's not so important in the high end, and so I can allow those through if they're there, like from some of the reverbs and stuff. They have stereo panning, and so yeah, that's why I use the Heat Plus FX, because it has the bass mono, and I mono everything below 200 hertz. If it's not for that, and if that is not as important to you, then you can get exactly the same sound from an analog Heat Mark II or an analog Heat Mark I. They have the same saturation circuits, same drive, same filter, same EQ, basically same everything as far as what I'm using in this machine, except for the bass mono. So if you're looking for something like that, save yourself a bunch of money and get a Mark I if you can find one, because you'll get 3/4 of the value from a Mark I. You just won't have the bass mono. So I would definitely say go that route if you want to. So what else? Other questions in the chat? Anyone? Let me refresh and make sure I'm not missing anything. Sometimes if I don't refresh the chat, it'll look like nobody's asking any questions, and then there'll be like 40 questions that show up. So anyway, yeah, feel free to pop anything into there. Happy to answer whatever before we call it a day here. But yeah, so just to go back a little bit to the style and kind of what I'm using for the style, it's been one of the evolutions in my case recently is really going much more into depth with the effects that I have, and having insert effects on almost every voice, and then having the send effects going through things like the Ghost and the Cosland frequency shifter, so that I can make some really interesting sounds that I can morph and kind of modulate and change over time, rather than going for a whole bunch of new and different voices and stuff that change up. Like probably the two voices, well, Battering Ram is the voice I use the most, because I mean, that's my kick for everything. And Archer's Rig, they kind of go hand in hand. But as far as kind of tonal or melodic voices, the ones that I use the most are the Pizza and the BIA. And those are both really simple voices. And I like them because they have these, each of them has this character where it really cuts through in a mix that can be really cluttered with a lot of other sounds. And so if I can have that sound that cuts through and run it through interesting effects, it very quickly becomes something much more interesting than the note or two notes or whatever that I'm doing. So just again, listen to this. So that sound that you're hearing, those two notes that are repeating on 8 steps, that's coming from the BIA. So if I take the effects off that, and I open up the filter, take off the wave folding, that's it. Like, that's the whole sound. Not super interesting, but very audible. It's got this really unique quality that makes it cut through. Kind of like a 303 has this cool quality that no matter how messy your mix is, you can always hear it. Very much the same with the BIA. So, and then a lot of flexibility of sound with it as well. It's got octave shifting. But then putting it through a single effects unit, all of a sudden makes that one very simple sound very cool and atmospheric and interesting, right? And now, again, layering effects on effects. So that's, again, with the effect and without. But now if I was to put that effect, or that already affected signal through my send going out to the ghost, I can get even more layers of interesting sounds. Oops. So that, what you're hearing right now is drum groove plus 2 individual notes that are the same note. They don't even change pitch, but they're going through effects. And then if you go in and make subtle changes, for example, to that pattern, where if I was to shift one of those notes just by a half step, let's make it subtly change the pattern, add in another note. Now it's back down to just one note. And again, really subtle changes allow you to take advantage of that drum groove that stays repetitive into the point where it's kind of hypnotic. It pulls you in and it gets you into that same thing that like a meditative sound, so that it's something that can help you kind of get into noticing the subtleties of everything else that's going on, right? You know, then to bring back in the pizza now as a lead, for example, because I brought that back down into the lower register, I can bring the pizza up into the higher register. And with that, it's all on one note, but let's just go in and randomly change up some of these notes. Remember, we still have send effects that we can put that through now. just eliminated some of the steps from that sequence to make it a little bit bouncier, and then shorten up the decays. So you see what I was talking about before, it doesn't have to be a lot of changes in the melodies or in the melodic content, it's more about sound design elements. So I'm taking 4 notes on the pizza, and then I'm able to turn them into interesting moments that happen. Sending them through, again, send effects. And then you can make the moment and go through the send effect. So again, breaking this down to see how simple everything is that's going on, you have on the pizza, you have, if I take the effects off, that's what's coming out of the pizza right now. But when you add in some delay and reverb on the insert, it makes it interesting. Then when you add some send effect, and you start to manipulate things like filter cutoff or envelope, let more sound through with the decay change, or change up the index modifier. And then we have on the BIA, going back again, it's just a single note. So if I take off the effects, it doesn't sound like much. But then when you start to go through the effects, and again, you can make subtle changes here with filter. And we still have our pizza. So 4 notes on the pizza and 1 note on the BIA is all that's going on here except for the bass, or except for the drum groove. So if I take those 2 out, this is what's left. So this is enough to kind of keep things moving along, keep the beat happening, keeping people dancing, tapping their toes, bobbing their heads, whatever. And then you've got individual elements, again, the BIA. And then the more melodic lead with the pizza. And earlier we were talking about transitioning. Let's say I wanted the pizza to now be a bass element. I can just drop it down an octave or 2 and change up the sound design of it a little, and then I can use it to replace the BIA. That's without changing up the pattern at all, right? Let's say I change the pattern. Right now we don't have our BIA in there anymore, so we can bring in something like the melodic stuff that was going on the swarm, but we'll take out a few of those steps to make it a little groovier. And then we're in a totally different track, if you want, or a different motif, different song idea. And other ways that we can change up what we're doing. So slightly different design on the bass line. But then if we wanted to change things up, we can change up our kick, for example, if we wanted to do something more broken beat. I tend to filter if I'm gonna do this, just so that I can kind of cover up the change that I'm making. And then when I bring it back in, I'll make it a little bit more noticeable. Now again, into a totally different motif than what we were doing before. different kind of sound motif, sound palette, and this gets us to as if we're doing a different track. But you notice there was no transition, right? It wasn't like I went from one track to another. It was I switched the bass across, then I switched up my kick pattern, then I brought in a different type of hi-hat. I added in a single note here on the swarm so that it's kind of like it's adding in now to that that pattern that we're doing. I added some effects to that and put it on ascend. And then I can go back to my regular 4 on the floor kick forward. And you hear, now we're into a totally other motif. And then we can bring in a different type of percussive element. Again, totally different mood, totally different style. So that's one of the things that's really kind of key to this style is that there's not any one moment where you're in track A or in track B. Everything is constantly evolving and you just kind of leave it up to your own internal clock. When is the best moment? When does it feel right? When does the audience need a change? You can feel the energy from the crowd and say, oh, we've been doing this one for a while. We want to modify it. We want to change things up. It's been 4 on the floor kick for a while. Let's go to something that's a broken beat. Then after the break beat, it's been a little while with that. We want to bring it back into something that's more kind of driving forward. Maybe it's time for a breakdown. We take out our kick altogether. We bring in some melodic stuff that's kind of going crazy all over the place. So there's never that kind of standardized structure. And that's one of the things that I love about performing this way is that it's not formulaic, right? It's not just one thing that it's constantly doing over and over again. Whereas if you're like when I was DJing, there's pretty much every track is going to follow a format, right? There's an intro, there's a build up to a first break, which is usually a shorter one. Then there's kind of a drop that takes you to a middle section, which was probably the 8-bar loop that the producer came up with, where it has all the elements. Then there's a much bigger breakdown, much longer, for more drama, more excitement, more tension, builds up to a bigger drop. And that's going to have kind of a second main section, and then that's going to slowly filter down, or the instruments are going to start coming out in order for it to be the outro, so that the DJ can then mix into the intro of the next song, right? So that format happens all the time in kind of traditional dance music tracks, particularly techno tracks. So getting away from that for me was really important. I like the kind of free-flowing artistic side of it. I like to be able to make an idea if it comes to my head. And I also like to be able to kind of get that feeling that I get from the crowd that I was getting when I would DJ. But instead of having to say, okay, I feel like the crowd needs this type of thing. Okay, what track do I have? Find that track, find the section, get it ready to go, beat match it, get it mixed in, mix over to that track. Well, that takes a while. And by the time you do that, the mood may have changed, right? The moment may have passed. And when you're doing this style, you can try things out and take them out, or you can try things out and you see they work, you can lean into them and do more and more of those things. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to really customize the music that you're making to the event that you're performing at. And so that's why for me, I really lean into the improvised side of things. And so the setup is really set up in a way that lends itself to improvisation, and you know, including like the gears that I've chosen and how I have it patched and all that stuff. And yeah, so it's set up to be able to improvise on. It's not just a collection of my favorite modules. You know, I have a lot of modules in this case, which I love, which would never be in this case because they're not good for improvisation. They're not quick enough to kind of get into things like these are. So yeah, that's where everything comes from. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I do have a couple of courses. There's an April one that's enrolling right now that's going to start the end of next week. Goes for a month. It's an intensive course for a month, 50 videos, 8 group sessions, one-on-one session, weekly feedback on your on a video of your performance, online group, kind of social media chat group, whatever, where you can get to know other people that have taken the course. It's a great one. It's a lot of fun. You'll learn a lot, and kind of whichever level you're at, it's applicable, and it's really focused on improvised live performance, on what I'm doing here and helping people shift into using improvisation in a performance as a tool rather than having it be something you have to do because something broke and you have to wing it or whatever, like planning on improvising and getting into that. So if you want to sign up, there's a link in the description of the video, or you can go to circolive.com/courses and check it out. There's an improvised live performance course and a hybrid production course, which talks about how to use a live performance setup in conjunction with a DAW to make better productions, right? So anyway, if you're interested in either of those, get signed up now. There's a few spaces left on each one. There's a little discount online right now. So if you go do that, you'll see use code 2025 and you can get 25% off the course. And yeah, so go sign up if you're interested in going more in depth in this kind of stuff with other people. So let's see, what else do we have here in the chat? Put any questions in the chat here that you have about what we've been going over here. Happy to answer whatever. Let's see. Hey, what's going on? From Paris, France. Awesome. Bonjour, bienvenue. I cannot wait to get back to Paris, France, one of my favorite cities. Thanks for the fire emoji, Z. Let's see here. Do you ever perform around the Midwest, specifically Ohio? I have never played in Ohio, actually, now that I think about it. I would love to. So if you know any promoters in your area, no matter where you are, anybody globally, around the US, around the world, if you have a promoter in your area that does live performance stuff and they would like to have somebody else, or even if it's people that generally throw like after hours parties or nightclub events where it's usually DJs, that's most of the events that I play are like that, where I may be the only live performer. So happy to do that. If you have promoters that you think might be interested, send them to my website, to circolive.com, and you can, there's one of the pages on the website is for booking, and so they can go in there and send me information and let me know what's up with their thing, or they can reach out to me on social media. Instagram Messenger is always a good way to get in touch with me. So have them do that. Let's see, I have a push standalone and I'm going to add Tascam Model 12, Octatrack rhythm. Anything I should add? It's kind of hard to say what anyone should have or not have in their rig because it depends on what you're going to use it for. Like if you're planning on traveling and you're going to be playing gigs and like picking up your gear and moving it somewhere else, you've already got a gigantic setup, like heavy, big pieces of gear that are that will take a lot to move around. You'll need a lot of table space to set up and things like that. So I would say you probably wouldn't want to add anything. But if you're going to be using this just at home or in a studio environment or something that's more, I don't know, contained, or that you don't need to move around as much, you've also got quite a good variation there. I mean, push standalone, you could do a live set just on push standalone by itself without anything else. So you wouldn't really need any of the other stuff. A lot of the other things that you're talking about there are kind of duplicating things that the push standalone already does. So you don't really need them unless it's something that you really want to have, and because you really enjoy playing it. Like the biggest thing about the Octatrack is that it's a really good sampler and sample mangler, but so is Ableton Push. And Tascam Model 12 is a cool mixer, although really big if you're going to travel with it. But you don't really need that because you already have a mixer built into Ableton. You just need something to control it. So you could have a much smaller MIDI controller that would control the mixer that's internal to Ableton. And then the Rhythm Mark II, my favorite drum machine ever. Mine is right over there. If you can, let's see if I can turn this so you can see it. It is right. Can you see it? No, it's behind the chair. It's right there. So there's a Rhythm Mark II, and there's a Push standalone and an Octatrack. So that's kind of like your setup right over there. But I don't use any of those for traveling my performance because they're all really big and take up a lot of space. So I've really tried to scale everything down into something that I can take carry on a flight. But if that's not a concern for you, then by all means go for like whatever size gear that you want to have. But I would say with the if you're going to use the Push 3 standalone, it does all the things, right? So you don't really need anything else other than controllers for that. So everything else that you would have in addition to a Push 3 standalone is really just because it's something that you want to play, not because it's any kind of need or any kind of necessity. Because with the Push 3, you're covered. You've got it all. So yeah, so I would say again, it's hard to say, not knowing the where and how you're going to play, and also not knowing the style of music you're doing, but just knowing all those pieces of gear very well, I would say if you've got a Push 3 standalone, that's all you need. Everything else is just gravy. So then just figure out what you want to have to play with that. So yeah, let's see here. You can book at your show. You're the promoter. Awesome. So book me. I'll go. You're starting Mod Bang in Dayton, Ohio. Oh, cool. Nice. Well, I've played Matt's Mod Bang events in Seattle, and I've also played Blake's Mod Bang events in Portland. So that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, let me know. I'm going to be traveling a ton, so let me know ahead of time when that would be. Reach out to me on Instagram, direct message. That's the easiest way, and figure out when it would be and kind of what it would look like, because to fit into my travel schedule, I'm in Europe in May, July, and October. And then in between, I have a few other things. I'm doing some stuff in Mexico. I'm going out to Portland for an event, or not Portland, Seattle for an event with Matt that we haven't announced yet. So hopefully that'll be soon. But yeah, so definitely just let me know when that would be and what that would look like, because I would be happy to. Love to play in Ohio. Cool. What else? Any other questions anyone has about any of this fun and interesting stuff that we're using here? Anyone? Yeah, because otherwise that's kind of probably going to be it for today. We've been on for a good 2.5 hours. Let's hear. Not traveling. Appreciate my content and advice. You make techno and trip hop. Cool. Yeah. I mean, if you're not traveling, kind of go for it. Do it all. Because like I have like this setup that's right here is my travel setup. But I also have this huge modular. I have over there, I have SH101, a Polybrute, an Octatrack, a Push 3, Rhythm Mark II, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I have a huge Tascam Model 24 that's sitting right here next to me that you can't see. Other audio interface that's down underneath. So like surrounded by gear. So if you're doing stuff in a studio, it's great because you can have it all. You can connect it all together. You can connect it all through Ableton, and that way you can record things and multi-track and do all that stuff. But if you're going to be playing live, like I said, you really only need the push 3 standalone, because it does all the things. And then after that, you know, if you want to have a separate drum machine, cool, but you don't really need it because you can build a drum rack and have that same capability, even more because you have individual processing by channel and all that stuff inside Ableton. So yeah, it just comes down to what you want to use. And I would say, I would never tell anybody you have to use this or that or not use this or that, because it all comes down to what you like, and whatever's the thing that you find fun and inspiring to play, that's what you should use, you know. And you may have other constraints, you know, like I have the constraints of size to be able to travel, but if you don't have those, cool. I mean, use it as you see fit. All right, let's see, what else? Peter Brown, thanks for the great info as always. You're welcome, Peter. Peter's another alumni of my courses. So yeah, so if you have questions, you can ask people in the chat about the courses too, because there's a lot of people in the chat that have taken the courses. So yeah, but definitely, if you're interested in doing that, if you're interested in getting kind of deeper into information about a system for improvised live performance, that's really what one of the courses is. And then the other one is really about how to use hardware and software together to produce. It's not a how to produce in software. So you need to have a little bit of understanding of Ableton or another DAW. You don't have to use Ableton. You can use whichever DAW you want. But it's good to have a little bit of understanding of your DAW so that you can then make the most use of your hardware with it. But yeah, there's a lot that you can do back and forth between the DAW and the hardware, making things there that you can use in the hardware, making things in the hardware that you can use in the DAW. So it's there's a lot of back and forth that's very interesting. So definitely check it out if you are interested. Thanks, Peter. He's recommending the course, so that means you have to take it. Peter recommends it, so it's worthwhile. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate you all tuning in. And if you have any other questions, definitely put them in the comments of the video. Share the video around if you want. And if you're interested in the courses, circlelive.com/courses, and enrolling for April now. And that's going to be the last one for a little while. So if you're on the fence about doing it, I would do it now, just because depending on travel schedule, I'm not sure exactly when the next one is going to be. So definitely get signed up if you can. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you guys very much, and hope to see you in the next video. Take care and enjoy making music whenever you can. I'll talk to you all soon.